Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that lingers, heavy and uncomfortable, the kind that reminds you how the echoes of betrayal can travel through generations. The post came from a user asking, "Am I wrong for grounding my daughter and canceling her senior trip after I discovered she was cheating on her boyfriend?" In this rewritten version, the story takes place in a small gray-skied town in upstate New York, where winters drag on too long, and the weight of the past seems to cling to the air. The mother, now named Rachel, is 42, and she's been raising her two daughters mostly on her own since her divorce 3 years ago. Her ex-husband, David, shattered their marriage when his affair came to light, leaving Rachel with the pieces. Her eldest daughter, Elena, 17, has been dating Ryan, 18, for over a year. Ryan is the boy every parent hopes their daughter will bring home. He's kind, patient, the type who offers to help carry groceries without being asked. Rachel believed he would be valedictorian of his class, and more importantly, she believed he genuinely loved Elena. But a few weeks ago, while folding laundry, Rachel overheard Elena on the phone. The laughter was different, sharp, flirty, full of a kind of recklessness she hadn't heard before. At first, she thought she was hearing Ryan's voice on the other end. Then she heard her daughter say, "Another name. Cole." The realization settled like ice in her chest. A week later, Elena claimed she was heading out to spend time with a friend. Rachel, standing quietly by the window, watched her daughter walk outside and climb into a car. She saw her greet the driver with a kiss. It wasn't Ryan. Even after that moment, Ryan kept coming over, unaware of what Rachel knew. He and Elena still held hands on the couch, still laughed together in the kitchen, still looked like any young couple in love. It made Rachel feel sick, watching her daughter smile at one boy while giving pieces of her heart to another. When Ryan left that evening, Rachel couldn't keep it in any longer. She asked her daughter directly, "Are you cheating on your boyfriend?" Her response was cold. She said it wasn't her mother's business, that her personal life belonged to her alone. Rachel's voice trembled as she told her daughter that she had raised her better than this, that betraying someone's trust was wrong. Elena shrugged. She said she was bored with Ryan, that Cole was more her type. Rachel told her if she wasn't happy, she should end things with Ryan rather than string him along. But Elena didn't want to let go of either boy. She admitted she wasn't sure if she really wanted Cole, or if she just liked the attention, the fun of teasing and flirting. Rachel felt something break inside. Cheating had already cost her a marriage, and now she was watching her daughter step onto the same path. She decided there had to be consequences. She grounded Elena. She also told her she wouldn't be going on the long-planned senior trip with her friends. Elena didn't take it well. She packed her bags and went to stay with her father. Soon, Rachel's phone rang. It was David, his voice full of irritation, telling her she was overreacting, that Elena's high school relationship wasn't worth punishing her over. Rachel's voice cracked as she told him she wasn't acting out of spite. She was teaching their daughter that actions have consequences, that hurting someone just because you're bored isn't acceptable. Comments poured in on her post. Some told her she should explain to Elena how much cheating had destroyed their family, how watching her repeat those mistakes reopened old wounds. Others suggested she was projecting her own pain, that grounding her teenage daughter for being a bad girlfriend wasn't the lesson she thought it was. But through it all, one thing remained clear. Rachel's heart was heavy, watching history repeat itself in the most painful way. Some of the comments that came in after Rachel's post were sharp, like cold water thrown in her face. One user said they were older than her and spoke from the voice of experience, pointing out that cheating is selfish and thoughtless, but that high school dating is a messy, awkward journey for almost everyone. They told her grounding Elena wouldn't fix anything, that it felt like Rachel was taking out her old hurt from David's affair on their daughter, that being a bad girlfriend wasn't the same as breaking curfew or texting and driving. Those words stung, even if Rachel wouldn't admit it out loud. There were also others who seemed to understand, who noticed how Elena had always been closer to David, how she had become a daddy girl since the divorce, and how he often greenlit behavior Rachel would never tolerate. David gave the girls money and took them on little weekend trips, playing the role of the easy, fun parent, while Rachel handled the harder parts of parenting alone, the doctor visits, the discipline, the endless conversations about responsibility. One commenter even suggested maybe it was time for David to have Elena most of the time, to let Rachel focus on her younger daughter, Maya, who was only 14 and still impressionable. Someone else advised Rachel to think about telling Ryan or his parents about Elena's behavior, adding that when they had been cheated on, they wished someone had told them sooner. It was a swirl of voices, some supportive, some critical, and none of them made the house feel any less empty. Days passed and Elena stayed at her father's place. Rachel called her one evening, hoping they could talk. Her voice was softer this time, the edges worn down by worry. She told her daughter she was thinking about reconsidering the cancellation of her senior trip, but only if Elena could be honest about what was going on with Cole. Elena sighed on the other end of the line. She said it wasn't serious, that she was just having fun. Her heart felt tight, like it was shrinking in her chest. She told her daughter she needed to decide which boy she wanted to be with. But Elena's words were like little knives. She said she didn't want Cole in any real way, but that he was fun. Ryan, she admitted, could be serious, maybe even a little controlling, and Cole made her feel lighter, freer. She asked her mother why she cared so much, why she was acting like Ryan was her child instead of her. Rachel whispered back that it wasn't about sides. It was about right and wrong. She told Elena that cheating was hurting Ryan even if he didn't know it yet, and that the pain of betrayal didn't disappear just because the person hadn't discovered it. Elena didn't agree. She said she wasn't hurting Ryan because he didn't know about Cole. Rachel's voice turned hard for the first time in the call. She told Elena she would have to tell Ryan the truth, and only then would she be allowed to go on the trip. There was silence on the line before Elena said she couldn't do that. She admitted she still wanted Ryan, even if he annoyed her sometimes, but she also wanted the thrill of something different. Rachel closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressing down. She told her daughter she couldn't use both of these boys as if they were toys, switching between them whenever she got restless. She asked quietly if Cole went to the same school. "No," Elena answered, "and he's not in school at all." That detail made Rachel's stomach sink. She pressed further. How old was Cole? Elena dodged the question, muttering that he wasn't that much older, but wouldn't say more. After the call, Rachel's anxiety turned to something heavier: fear. She picked up the phone and called David. She explained everything, her voice tight and uneven, and told him she was worried about how secretive their daughter was being about this man. But David brushed her off. He told her she needed to stop hovering, that Elena was almost an adult now and had to make her own decisions and mistakes. Rachel's frustration boiled over. "How can you not be concerned?" she asked. But David stayed calm, too calm. He said he trusted Elena, and he accused Rachel of projecting her own issues onto her daughter. Rachel's hands shook as she held the phone. She told him that with how little they knew about Cole and Elena's refusal to even break up with Ryan, there was no way she was letting their daughter go on that senior trip. That was when David's tone changed, his patience snapping. He told her she couldn't make that decision alone. David's voice hardened over the phone, cutting through the static like a cold blade. He told Rachel she couldn't make these decisions on her own, that Elena was his daughter too, and that she had no right to cancel something as big as her senior trip without his approval. He went further, telling her that he'd be paying for the entire trip himself, and that she needed to step back if she wanted their daughter to ever come home again. The words echoed in Rachel's kitchen long after the call ended, making the quiet house feel even emptier. More comments poured in online, each one holding a different kind of sting. One person pointed out that Rachel kept talking to Elena about how her cheating was hurting Ryan, as if Ryan were Rachel's own child. So of course Elena felt like her mother was on his side. They suggested Rachel shift the focus, to explain instead how her daughter's actions were damaging her own character, and how the fallout would inevitably hurt her too. Another voice said something even darker, that each time Elena did the wrong thing and got away with it, it would be easier for her to do it again. That little by little, she would chip away at her own sense of who she was until she could barely recognize herself. Someone else offered a blunt observation that hit Rachel harder than she expected. They said Elena learned from David that cheating wasn't such a big deal. Reading that felt like swallowing glass. It was true. Elena had been there when Rachel's world fell apart. She had seen her father's affair unfold, heard the shouting, felt the silence afterward. And maybe she'd decided, whether she realized it or not, that betrayal was just part of life, something people lived through and got over. Other commenters had their own takes. Some thought canceling the trip might not be the right move, but they all agreed on one thing. Elena didn't deserve to have someone like Ryan if she was going to treat him this way. One particularly harsh voice said Rachel should let Elena live with David full-time, let him deal with the sneaking around, with the unknown man who didn't even go to school and was not that much older, as Elena put it. Let him face the fallout when things got ugly. Rachel stared at that comment for a long time. She hated how much sense it made. But there was nothing else to say in that post. It ended there. The thread shifted to another story entirely, but Rachel's thoughts stayed knotted in the same place. The new story felt strange and hollow after what she had just read, but it painted another messy family scene. This time it was a man named Evan, 22, sharing about his own fractured holiday plans. He described a night visiting his older brother Lucas, 27, at his small apartment in Albany. Their other brother, Caleb, 24, was there too. They sat around the kitchen table, eating takeout and catching up, all of them knowing that this Christmas would be different. For the first time, they wouldn't all be together. Caleb was spending the holiday with his in-laws, along with his wife and kids. Lucas was doing the same. Evan would be with his mom, stepdad, his partner, and his grandmother. There was talk of getting together after Christmas, but it wouldn't be the same. As they talked, Caleb brought up an idea he was clearly excited about. He wanted everyone to spend $50 on a single gift, wrap it in plain paper, and do a gift swap. The way he described it, one person would pick a gift, the next could either pick a new one or steal an opened one, and at the end, the first person would have one last chance to swap. Evan listened quietly. He didn't like it. To him, Christmas wasn't about swapping random gifts like strangers at an office party. It was about giving. He loved choosing thoughtful things for each person, picturing their faces when they unwrapped something chosen just for them. The white elephant game felt wrong, impersonal, and cold. Before anyone could ask, Evan made it clear his brother wasn't struggling for money. In fact, Caleb and his in-laws were doing better financially than anyone else. That wasn't the point. He simply didn't want to take part in a gift exchange that felt like it stripped the meaning from something he loved. He wondered if that made him selfish, and he asked strangers on the internet if he was wrong for wanting to skip the whole thing. In an edit later, he explained that nearly everyone in his family was well off: Lucas, Caleb, all of their in-laws. Even his mother and stepdad weren't thrilled about the idea. Christmas had grown more complicated as the family expanded, but they would have preferred something like Secret Santa, something still personal, still thoughtful. And then there was Caleb's mother-in-law, demanding an expensive gift or refusing to come to Christmas at all, turning what should have been simple into another layer of drama. It was a different story, but beneath it, there was the same hollow ache. Families trying to hold on to something meaningful while everything around them seemed to shift. If Caleb didn't get his way, he made sure everyone in the room felt it. That controlling edge had always been there, a quiet force that turned louder when Christmas rolled around. Last year had been especially bitter. Rachel still remembered it. She and her mother had rented a holiday house in Salem, hoping for warmth, laughter, maybe a little magic. Rachel had covered nearly 90% of the cost herself, her mother helping with the rest. When the season came, her sons, Caleb and Lucas, showed up with gifts for their grandmother, a sweet gesture, but they didn't give their mother so much as a thank you card. It stung worse when they presented expensive gifts to their mother-in-laws, while Rachel, the one holding everything together, was left with nothing but silence. Rachel wasn't materialistic. She would have been happy with something small, a note scribbled on a card, any sign they remembered her, but that didn't come, and that memory had stayed sharp. Maybe that's why she hated the idea of the white elephant this year. It felt hollow, just another way to strip the love out of giving. Evan decided he'd avoid it entirely. He'd focus on buying gifts for his partner, her second Christmas with the family, her own family didn't celebrate, and for the people who mattered most: his mom, stepdad, grandmother, and all the nieces and nephews. At the end of the day, all they wanted was to find some middle ground, some way for Caleb to feel satisfied too. But hope like that doesn't always hold. A few days later, Evan posted again, a weary update. Their grandmother had gathered them together, saying Caleb had something important to share. It turned out to be the same old song, Caleb rehashing the white elephant idea, this time complete with rules, rigid, detailed rules. It wasn't framed as a discussion, it was an announcement. "This is what we're doing," he said, "no debate." That was Caleb, always pushing, always steering, even when everyone else hated where they were being dragged. Last year, he'd forced Secret Santa on them, and most of them despised it, but no one spoke up because you didn't cross Caleb. This year, Evan decided he couldn't stay quiet. He told his brother the truth. "This isn't fun for most of us. White elephant feels corporate, joyless. This isn't what Christmas means to our family." Suggesting even Secret Santa again felt like he'd spoken some forbidden word. The fallout was immediate. Not long after, Rachel called Evan in tears. She confessed the white elephant idea made her feel awful. It hurt, she said, that her sons didn't want to buy her a Christmas gift anymore, not even something small. She carried so much for all of them, and now it felt like that effort didn't matter. Then she did what mothers do. She went straight into the group chat and said it out loud. She told them she didn't like white elephant because she still loved giving gifts with meaning. She even asked Megan and Blair, Caleb's wife and Lucas's, if they planned to skip individual gifts for their own families too. Both women quickly answered no. They'd still buy for their own families, of course. That stung even more. Rachel called Evan again later, her voice sharper this time. She said she felt like a second-class family member, like her sons could put effort into gifts for their in-laws, but couldn't be bothered for her. And she wasn't wrong. Most years they either bought her last-minute junk or forgot her entirely. It wasn't just her. Her stepdaughters, Jo, Edie, and Tatum, felt the same anger bubbling. Edie even called the white elephant idea lazy, a shortcut for Caleb to avoid real thought. The rebellion grew. Caleb, sensing he was losing his grip, tried to salvage control. He suggested a vote, white elephant or secret Santa. But by then, Evan was finished. He dropped out. So did Edie, Tatum, Rachel, her husband, and their grandmother. And that's when Blair stepped in, the unexpected voice of compromise. She suggested they drop gifts for the adults altogether, just buy for the kids. She framed it as balance, but it felt like something else, a door quietly shutting on all the grown-ups and on what Christmas used to mean. Caleb's declaration hit the room like a closing door. Christmas is only for kids, he said, and that was that. The words settled over everyone like a gray fog, and it felt like something old and warm had been quietly stuffed out. From there, the family split. Rachel, her daughters Edie and Tatum, and Evan decided they would exchange gifts with one another, just them, and keep buying for the kids, because, as Rachel said, they're innocent in all of this. But Caleb, Lucas, Megan, and Blair would get nothing. The holiday plans unraveled quickly. What should have been a season of joy turned into a mess of half-spoken resentment and long silences on the phone. The laughter that used to fill the room at this time of year felt far away now, like a memory you couldn't quite touch. Evan admitted the whole thing had killed the holiday spirit for him. It wasn't the ending he wanted, but at least he knew who still believed in the kind of Christmas that meant more than rules and votes. Then, just as the dust started to settle, another update came, and this one made everything feel heavier. He typed it at work, fingers rushing across his phone, the words spilling out like he couldn't hold them in anymore. Caleb had finally come clean. The reason for all his pushing, the secret Santa last year, the white elephant this year, wasn't just about control. He was drowning. Caleb and Megan had been living like they were made of money. Luxury vacations, expensive furniture, endless shopping sprees. They had maxed out credit cards, taken on loans, and built a life that looked shiny from the outside, but was crumbling inside. They were buried in debt. Caleb admitted it to his mom, his voice breaking, saying he was dealing with heavy PTSD, that he was lost and didn't know what to do. Rachel told him he had to stop. She told him to quit throwing money at things they couldn't afford, to walk away from the new house they were trying to buy before it ruined them. But Caleb didn't listen. He couldn't. He was too afraid of how it would look, afraid his friends, his coworkers, everyone around him would see through the rich guy act he'd built. The truth was, nobody cared as much as he thought they did, but pride can make you blind. Evan's heart ached for his brother, even as frustration burned beneath it. How do you spend money like it's monopoly cash and not think it will catch up to you? Still, he couldn't just stand back. He didn't have much, but he could offer what he always had: his time, his help, his willingness to step in. He couldn't give Caleb money, but he could help with the kids, could watch them while Megan and Caleb tried to sort through the wreckage they'd made. As for Christmas, Evan thought about being petty. He thought about only buying gifts for the people who believed in giving, for the nieces and nephews, for the ones who didn't make this so complicated. But guilt crept in like it always did. He couldn't help himself. In the end, he bought something for Caleb, for Megan, for Lucas, for Blair, even knowing they probably wouldn't get him anything in return. Because for him, it wasn't about what he got back. Christmas wasn't about keeping score. It was about giving, about choosing something small but meaningful for each person, about love in the shape of a wrapped box. He wrote that he hoped Caleb would wake up, that he'd learn to stop spending money he didn't have, that he'd finally see the damage he was doing. But he couldn't say those words to him directly. Not yet. He was the younger brother, and younger brothers carry things in silence. Evan admitted in one of his later updates that he didn't want Caleb to suffer, but he did hope his older brother would finally see this as a lesson, that he'd stop, take a breath, and appreciate what he already had. Not everyone online was sympathetic. One blunt commenter wrote, "So not only are you enabling them, but you're getting another job to help clean up their mess. I hope you're joking, because if not, you're a fool." It was harsh, but Evan didn't flinch. He replied with honesty that felt raw. He said it wasn't simple, that he'd always been the kind of person who wanted to carry the burdens of others, to figure out what was broken and try to fix it. "I'm a fixer," he wrote. "That's just who I am." He admitted his relationship with Caleb hadn't always been easy. They hadn't been close for years after Caleb moved out 7 years ago. But whenever Caleb hit trouble, Evan found himself stepping in, patching holes, smoothing edges, doing whatever he could. Now, he worried about his brother in ways that made his chest ache. Caleb had been sober for 2 years. Evan was proud of him for that. But with the debt, the stress, the shame pressing down, he feared what might happen. Would Caleb start drinking again? Would all the progress he'd made crumble under the weight of this chaos? Part of Evan whispered that he needed to step back, to let Caleb face the storm he'd created, to let him carry the weight of his own choices. But another part of him, the louder part, wanted to fix everything, wanted to pick up every broken piece and glue it together. Honestly, he wrote, "I feel like crying because I feel so bad for my brother. I don't want to enable him, but I also don't want him to suffer. None of this is black and white. It's all shades of gray." Then came what he titled his final update. He said it would probably be his last post for a while. He needed to sign out, to step away, to breathe. It was late when he wrote it, and he'd just come back from seeing his mom. Someone had sent him his posts, and she'd read them all. She wasn't angry, but she was disappointed. Not in a sharp way, but in the way that makes your heart ache. She told Evan she could see he'd been carrying all of Caleb's pain on his own shoulders, and it had been dragging him under. Something about hearing that made Evan finally break. He realized he'd been struggling so deeply for so long without even recognizing it. His mom told him she could tell he wasn't okay. She said he'd stopped eating properly, that he looked like a Victorian child, thin and pale. And those words, strange as they were, cut through to him. She reminded him it wasn't his job to fix everything. She told him Caleb, stubborn and impulsive as he was, would figure out his own mess in time. She had been talking to Caleb directly, urging him and Megan to back out of the house deal, to find somewhere cheaper, reassuring him that no one would think less of him if he stepped back. As for Christmas, Evan wrote that they'd canceled the white elephant swap entirely. The gifts he had already bought for people would be saved, given later for birthdays instead. And then came the hardest decision. He was stepping back from his family for a while. He needed to focus on himself, on the job that might move him to Zurich, on the life he'd been pushing aside to fix everyone else's. He still cared about Caleb, would always care, but he couldn't keep bleeding himself dry to save him. In one quiet line, he admitted he'd signed up for therapy. Years of depression, and I've been pretending it isn't there. It's time to finally deal with it. There was one last small update after that, a softer one. They'd all met on December 26th. Caleb actually brought a gift, a single household present, a framed portrait of his kids. Lucas gave Evan a small ornament with his name carved in. It wasn't much, but Evan smiled. Then one of the kids hit him on the back of the head with a plastic golf ball. It hurt. He laughed anyway, but deep down, He wondered if anything in that house could survive another year like this. The house was loud that evening, the clatter of dishes and voices mixing with the smell of dinner. But inside, Evan felt hollow. He and his partner had been arguing more and more. She wanted him to move to Switzerland sooner, to leave this chaos behind. But the reality was harsher. Money was tight, and he'd just lost his job. The move would have to wait. Beneath it all, something darker had been growing. Evan admitted he'd been struggling with depression and anxiety for longer than he wanted to admit. He was doing everything he could to stay afloat, but some days felt like treading water with weights tied to his feet. Still, he wrote that he wanted to believe things would get better, that somehow they'd settle down. There was another layer, too, a diagnosis he hadn't shared before: autism. It explained some of the ways the world felt overwhelming, why he'd always been the one to overextend, to take on every problem around him. Evan's post ended on that bittersweet note. He still had a big heart. Too big, maybe. He'd taken on Caleb's debt, his stress, his mistakes, giving even when nothing came back. He admitted he wasn't eating properly, the toll written across his face. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back and let others carry the weight of their own choices. In real life, this story hits close to home for many people. It's easy to fall into the trap of becoming the fixer, the one who sacrifices sleep, money, even health, to hold everyone else together. But that path leads to burnout. If you see yourself in Evan, take a breath. Set boundaries, even with family. Prioritize therapy, rest, and your own stability. Helping others is noble, but your life shouldn't be collateral damage.